Jo Tuffill and I'm a management accounting expert tutor. I've taught on ACCA courses for over 20 years and I'm passionate about supporting students. Hence the reason I really enjoy doing these webinars and I thank the ACCA for letting me do them. So what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to be covering some key insights to the examiner's report. I'm going to show you how you should be using that examiner's report in your study. It's important to use that alongside the practice platform and the sample answers. I'm going to be also looking at the study hub, showing you that the content in the study hub is relevant to that exam that you're taking and showing you how the practice exam questions that have been released are in that study hub. The answers are effectively in there if you use it effectively. Then we're going to be looking at some effective exam strategies, giving you some top tips. And then you've got your final Q&A session. So that's your chance to ask me your questions. I kind of would like you to give me specific questions rather than general questions because they are there for the best type of question to answer. You'll get a more specific answer than a general answer. So let's focus on specific question, please, and not too general. So let's get started looking at the September-December 2024 examiner's report. First of all, though, do you read the examiner's reports? Can you let me know whether you do that by taking this poll? Hopefully they can see the polls, can they? Or have I gone too far? Oh yeah, I've gone too far. Just a minute. There you go. Try again. Not sure the polls are working, so I might move it on. Oh, we've got them now working. Okay, brilliant. So 56.9% are using those examiners' reports. Brilliant. That's exactly what we want to hear. Now, if you don't know where they are, they're on the ACCA website underneath the student resources. And it's in the area where you can see the past exam question links, the technical articles. It's a valuable resource. Why not take advice from the examining team, the ones who set your exam? So make sure you do look at them. Right, so what is in the examiner's report? Just to give you a guide, it's constructive guidance from the examining team. They go over 4 Section A tricky questions. They go over 1 full case question for Section B, often a tricky one for students, and they give you 2 constructed response questions, and they go over those, giving you some key insights. And those are the ones that are also on the practice platform for you to actually have a go at yourself. So they're really important, these examiners' reports. So I'm just going to focus for a minute on Section C, examiner's report. This is where the examining team provide constructive guidance on how to answer the questions, whilst sharing their observations from the marking process and highlighting any strengths and weaknesses of candidates. It's key advice for you if you failed this exam before, and so it's important that you do take that advice. And the best way of using it as part of your exam preparation is to attempt the question practice actually on the practice platform. Then review the published answers alongside the report. So let's have a look at that now. Let's go to the platform and show you how to use this report effectively. So I'm now going to share my screen, so you need to look in the media player. So I am sharing the TestReach site. Hopefully everybody can see that. And what I'm doing is I'm sharing the TestReach site, the actual marking section of the TestReach site. And what you can see here is I have completed one of those questions on investment appraisal area of the syllabus. Let's have a look at the examiner's report, if it will let me. And so if you see the examiner's report up here is for September, December 2024, and it shows you the Section A, Section B and Section C, and it gives you total debriefs on both those Section C questions. So if we go down to Part 10, which is Galley Company, it gives you an overview of the scenario. It then tells you what the requirements were. So the first set of requirements was to calculate the expected net present value and then comment on its financial acceptability. What you should notice here is it says expected net present value. You're not used to seeing that. You're used to seeing calculate the nominal net present value or just calculate the net present value. And then comment on its financial acceptability is for 2 marks. And so there's an indication there that normally that is for 1 mark. Hopefully everybody remembers this. But if there's 2 marks, that must mean that you have to say something else. So other than just say it's acceptable. So if we go through this quick scenario, it says here there's four or five sections which are bread and butter for a net present value calculation, and you should be able to do this. There's lots of practice on the practice platform of this type of question. The first section here is about the expected value, and we've got to find an expected value for volume, hence the reason the expected net present value. The second section is about inflation. The third section is about reducing balance tax. And the fourth section is the dreaded working capital, which most students do not like, but you need to practice because it's 2 marks in this question, 2 valuable marks in this question. You always read the bottom, find out what your tax rate is, and find out what you're supposed to be praising at 13%. So the examining team then go through in detail the pitfalls of this question. First, looking at the expected sales volume, that students tended to do the average, simple average, and not use the probabilities that were given in the question. They also go on about the inflating, which is always a tricky area for students, and showing you how you've got to inflate those prices for 2 years, if it's in current price terms and you need it in year 2, giving you the approach that you should be using. They then talk about how you should be doing those tax allowed with depreciation benefits. And finally, they talk about showing you how to do the working capital. So the examiner's report is a fountain of knowledge for you to use alongside marking your answer. So if we now go to TestReach, you can see that you could look at each of these paragraphs along with marking your answer in TestReach. So I'm going to turn on my tick marking mode, and I'm going to show the sample answer now by clicking here, so that I am able to now mark here if it comes up using the sample answer. Now I know it's small for you, but I just wanted to show you how the sample answer comes up next to your answer. You can move this screen over and you can look at the marking scheme below to see where the marks are allocated. And remember, most of these marks in a net present value calculation are own figure rule marks. because if you get something wrong at the top, it will often flow through to the next mark below. So for instance, if you'd got this expected volume wrong, you didn't get the 8,500, that would be a lost one mark, but it wouldn't mean that you get the sales revenue wrong. And it wouldn't mean that you get the sales price wrong, the variable cost wrong, because you're using volume that is incorrect, but using it as a price. So you have to realize that just because you get one thing wrong, you don't get everything else wrong. So the model answer is what it is, and it's very difficult sometimes to see where the calculations come from. So for instance, that 73.15, they haven't given you the calculation for that, but in the examiner's report, they've told you clearly how they've calculated that. So using it in conjunction is really important. This lays it out in a sort of a written format, whereas the examining report really you should be using in conjunction with looking at your spreadsheet. So in order to use the tick marks, you can click on the tick mark, and this number 1 will give you a tick here of 1 mark for the expected value. And then you can go down making sure that you have calculated everything correctly now for variable costs, sales price, adding up your marks as you go. If you've got them wrong up here, then these become own figure rule marks, so you can click on that to prove that you're going to get the own figure rule marks. It's really important to use the sample answers and the examining report when marking your answers. And actually marking your answers yourself also helps you to see where it's inconsistent. So the examining team always go on about the fact that students do not show their workings. If you click on here, you'll see that my workings are all shown to the examining team. So if there's something slightly wrong that I may have written slightly wrong in my answer, maybe I wrote the 70 in as 71, I would not get that marked wrong because it was a transposition error, whereas the working is absolutely correct. Again, when you're doing the tax, as long as they can see the working is correct off the operating cash, again, you would then get the own figure rule marks, even if the operating cash was wrong. So referencing workings is really important as well. Working 1, working 2 to go to your tax benefits. Again, it goes in at the right timing, but if any of this is wrong down here, you don't lose the markup there. So absolutely making sure that you spend as much time marking your answer, focusing on the technique, focusing on your layout to become quick and efficient at getting these net present value calculations done. Using the column format, using the sum in the calculations is really important. The other thing that's really important is using the quick techniques for the MPV. As you can see, I have used the MPV formula. And it's important that you know how to use this because you have to highlight the cash flows from years 1 to 4 and then add back those cash flows in year 0. The MPV formula only works from the cash flows from year 1 onwards. So practicing makes perfect. And this, again, is valuable knowledge in the examiner's report. Absolutely down here, it's good practice for candidates to make full use of the spreadsheet functionality. E.g., the expected net present value of the project, use the MPV formula, and they show you how to do that in the actual report. Take the advice. It's so much quicker than using the discount factors. Just as a word of warning, though, you will get a rounded version of the expected net present value, not a rounded version, you'll get a fully accurate version if you use the MPV formula. If you use the discount factors, you'll get a separate figure which is rounded because of the discount factors. They are equally valid and will score equal marks. You really mustn't worry about that. This is all about making sure you show your workings. The other point is the writing area. So there's 2 marks going, it says here, for brief comments were required on the project's financial acceptability. This was required in the actual spreadsheet. So it's really important for you to lay it out as one sentence on one line. Do not write in one cell and make it wrap all the way around forever and a day. It's really hard, as you can see, for me to move that to see what you've written. So please space it out in sentences on either line. That's so much more important. So 2 marks were going for this, and you needed to write one sentence which says the expected net present value of the project is positive, therefore accept the project. You have to give a reason why it's acceptable. And then 1 mark was going for the fact that it was a net present value calculation, which is based on expected values. And that fact there's a 70% chance that the net present value will be higher, but also there's a 30% chance it will be lower. That's because that expected net present value isn't an actual outcome. So it's really important to understand where the marks are going and how much time you're going to allocate to them, and making sure that you only write enough to get 2 marks and don't write 4 marks worth, wasting your time. So as you can see, formats matter for easy marking, and so please remember to practice on the practice platform and use the tips that the examining team are giving you, because then they will mark it efficiently and effectively, and they'll feel happy about marking it. So hopefully that's clear how to use the examining report and their constructive advice. Please, if you've got any questions, just put them in the chat and I'll answer them at the end. Now I want to go on to discovering the Study Hub. So what I'm going to show to you now is the resources in the Study Hub and how they can be used in your exam preparation, even as late as now. So if you, for instance, have a look at a question and you don't know the answer to it, you can use the Study Hub to go and reference that learning quite quickly and then be able to answer it rather than just looking at the answers to the questions. So, for instance here, sample question A in the examiner's report, it says which 2 of the following are not money market instruments? Well, if you've forgotten what the money market is, then you can quickly reference the Study Hub and find the answer by using the search function, typing in money market instruments, which I'll show you in a minute. So here we have 2 to select from bills of exchange, commercial paper, preference shares, bankers' acceptance, and irredeemable loan notes. And here in the Study Hub is the answers. So you can go into the search function and type in money markets, and this will list to you the answers to those questions. And so once you've read it, you'll then easily, therefore, learn from what you have read because you've referenced it, rather than going to the answer. You've understood it, and now you know that 2 which are not money market instruments are preference shares and irredeemable loan notes. So it's understanding that it's short-term finance only, and therefore preference shares and irredeemable loan notes are not available on the money markets because they're long-term. But I have a question for you, which you can write in the attendee chat for me. Which market are preference shares and irredeemable loan notes on? Does anybody know? Post your answers in the chat. Anybody know which money market are they on if they're not on the money market? You can post in the chat. Anybody? Getting some answers here. Thank you for answering, and they're all correct. Well done. The capital market is for long-term finance. Thank you for those answers. So long-term finance will be preference shares, loan notes, ordinary shares, irredeemable loan notes, redeemable loan notes, convertible loan notes. Then the other question to look at on the examiner's report was a Section B question. Now, Section B is Syllabus Area G risk management. And this is all about interest rate risk management and foreign exchange risk management. And what we were given is a case study about Griff Company, who is operating with legal expenses in a foreign country called Farnland. You've been given some exchange rates, a spot and a 6-month forward rate. And we've also talked about some bank loans at the bottom in pesos, which is split equally between fixed rate and variable rate debt. Now, your Section B questions, which I will talk about again later, will come, one of them will definitely come from the risk management area. You cannot avoid risk management. 10 marks of your exam will be on it at least, because it could also come up in Section A. However, risk management does not come up in Section C, just to be clear. So it's virtually certain that you will get a question on risk management. So I've just given a selection of the questions from the examiner's report. And so it's important to understand exchange rate theory. It's important to understand how to do a lead payment, as well as a forward rate, as well as a money market hedge. And then question 3 is a statement about interest rate risk. And it's talking about negative gap exposure and basis risk. Now, there were 2 other questions, but I didn't want to show every question. I'm just trying to give you a flavour of, if you didn't understand or know how to do these questions, you can do what I say and go to the study hub. So looking at number 3, which was about gap exposure and basis risk, in order to be able to answer that question, this is in the study hub, and all you would do is type in gap exposure and basis risk, and it would find that relevant area for you to understand how to answer that question. So let's now look at the study hub in a bit more detail using the other Section C question, giving you a live demo. Now, the Section C question was on working capital syllabus area C. And it was applying relevant counting ratios to inventory turnover, average collection period and average payable collection, discussing the cash operating cycle, and applying relevant techniques to managing cash, like the Miller-Orr model, and discussing possible motives for holding cash. These were the questions which are allocated to each of those areas. So the first one said calculate the cash operating cycle. It's cash operating cycle, make it shorter. And then it was calculate using the Miller-Orr model, the target cash balance, and then discuss the motives for holding cash. So all of those are in working capital management, and all of those can be answered using the study hub. Going to the study hub, looking at the chapters which are relevant to those, testing yourself through the quizzes, doing further question practice, and the easiest way to find the answers is to use the search engine function. So let me share my screen again now and show you how to do that. So I'm in the study hub now for the financial management exam, and here's all the chapters. So you can either focus and look for the chapter heading and then find it. So you've got cash management there and working capital management, which you could look for. Or you could go into the search function and type in a search. So I'm going to type in operating Sorry, I meant to type in cash operating cycle. Sorry. Cash operating. Click search, and here comes the cash operating cycle. So I can go to the relevant section and read up on it. Then I could go and click on the practice question, which would be similar to the one on the practice platform to practice. And then I could go and practice the practice question. There's another one down here, Pangy Company. And then it shows you working the flashcard, the relevant flashcard, and then the quiz. So all of this is easy referenced by doing a search function. What was the other one that we had to do? Was Miller-Orr model. If you hadn't practiced that, then it instantly comes up and explains what the Miller-Orr model is. There's a revision question to practice, another revision question, and a constructed response question, which would be similar to the one on the practice platform. And then you've got cash motives. I think it's called liquidity needs. And here you go, the liquidity needs, which is the motives for holding cash. And so you can go and read up on those motives and then construct your answer using that knowledge that you've gained from the study hub. So yes, the study hub is useful for your exam preparation. Obviously, it's a learning tool because it's a textbook. It's a testing tool through flashcards and quizzes, and it's a practice tool through revision questions and obviously constructed response questions down the bottom. And the easiest way to find the relevant section is to use that search function, as I've shown. So hopefully you are using the study hub for your practice. Let's now look at effective exam strategies. So first of all, these are your syllabus areas. And I get this question time and time again, what are the most important syllabus areas? What do we need to do to make sure we pass this exam? Well, I'm afraid that all come up. So the whole of Section A could have all those syllabus areas in there. So by not looking at one of those syllabus areas, you could be missing out on 2 easy marks, which will get you over that 50% pass mark. So please make sure you practice Section A questions on the whole syllabus area. Section C questions absolutely come from these 3 main areas: working capital, investment appraisal, and business finance. You could get discursive questions from A and B, less likely from B, more likely from the financial management function, and obviously ratios, which are to do with the financial management function, could be in Section C. But absolutely, the main areas are C, D, and E. Now, Section B, you will definitely get, virtually certain, a question from business and asset valuations and a question from risk management. So 20 marks will come from sections F and G areas of the syllabus. The other Section B question could be on any of the other syllabus areas. So do not ignore F and G just because it's not tested in Section C. It can be tested across A, and it definitely gets tested in Section B. Hopefully that is clear. So 20 marks is a guarantee for your exam. Game plan. Please have a game plan and practice it. I always recommend doing A, then C, then B. B tends to be the hardest section of the exam, and you don't want to be panicking earlier in your exam because you're finding it hard. So leave it to the end. Take heart in the fact that you've completed section A and section C to the best of your ability, and therefore section B you won't be feeling so panicked in if you can't do so well in it. You do need to stick to time. I would recommend 45 minutes, 85 minutes, and 50 minutes. That's really important to stick to time. Give yourself enough time in section C to do it justice, but don't lose too much time to the detriment in section B. You need time in section B to make sure that you do those 3 case studies and get the easy marks. Flag any MCQs you can't do straight away. Leave them to the end of your section time. You're probably not going to get them right in the first place, so why spend time getting worried about that? Focus on the easier marks and come back to them if you have time at the end. You're much better getting those easier marks early, and you will not therefore fall for distractors. And that's the most important thing to understand with the MTQs. There are distractors. There's the right answer, there's 2 plausible answers, and there's 1 really not right answer. But the thing is, those distractors are there for a reason. And that's because they're partly there because you're calculating something on the way, or they're an early right answer. So you really mustn't rush through, and you must reread the question before you select the answers. Understanding why the distractors are there actually helps you spot them. So build that into your question practice. It's really important to learn theory and techniques, formats. Do not learn answers. Techniques and theory get repeated, but questions don't. Now, similar questions do, but they tend to slightly change the view of the requirement. So having the theory and the techniques in your head and the understanding will help you apply that to the requirement, focusing on what the examining team wants and not what you've learnt from an answer. So formulas and process are important to learn. Getting those formats into the spreadsheet in a quick and efficient way, and then you just have to fill in the numbers. For instance, with weighted average cost of capital or the net present value calculation, you have to be able to explain concepts as well as calculate them. For instance, CAPM. You have to be able to apply pros and cons to the requirement. So the IRR. They could just simply ask you what are the advantages of the IRR. Or they could ask you what are the advantages of the net present value function in comparison to the IRR. It's using the same theory, but it's a different requirement. And then definitions are really important, especially for Islamic finance. You do have to learn the names and you do have to learn those definitions. So the examining team comments about the written sections. They want professional presentation. You need to address the requirement that's present, not the one that you desire because you've learnt it. You need to plan your answers using headings to split the requirements. So if it says discuss 3 factors that affect working capital policy, then you need to have 3 separate headings to discuss 3 factors to get maximum marks. Discussing 1 or 2 factors will not get maximum marks. You need to discuss 3 if they've asked you to. You need to detail the number of points to reflect the number of marks. So if there's 4 marks going, you need 4 detailed points. Verbs and responses do not, I repeat, do not use bullet points, except the project is a bullet point. Accept the project because it's financially viable as the net present value is greater than 0, i.e. is positive, is a full sentence. Look at the verb being used in the requirement. Identify, describe, comment, then a short sentence will suffice, but it's still a sentence. But if it's explained, discussed, or critically discussed, then more detail will be required. So 2 full sentences probably. So you'd need to state the point, explain the point, and illustrate the point using the scenario if asked. Here's an example. Always think because and why. Critically discuss the usefulness of internal rate of return as an investment appraisal method. So critically discuss means come up with pros and cons, not just pros. 5 points would be required. So one of them, it is easy to understand by managers. That is a bullet point. That is not a full sentence because you haven't said the why. What you should be saying, it is easy to understand by managers as they are familiar with the relative measures such as percentages. For example, inflation rates and interest rates. You've said the why and it's a fully explained sentence. So 1 mark. The first one would not score any marks because its half a mark is no longer valid for written sections. It's 1 mark or nothing. So that's the end, and we are now in live Q&A. So I'm going to see where my Q&A is. Jo's questions. So we've got quite a lot of time for the Q&A, so if you want to start asking more questions, you can. I'm going to try start with the bottom. Will I be penalised for not expressing the KE as a decimal when calculating the PM? As it's mandatory to express the right as 1 minus t as a decimal, I think I've possibly missed a decimal point under exam pressure. You need to show your workings. That's what I think you're saying. So if they're able to see that your workings and it's a transposition error, you should be given some credit if it is in the section C area of the exam. Okay. Obviously, I would always use the formats in the spreadsheet. I tend to round to 2 decimal places when I'm showing a format, but obviously when you're using that figure in the Excel spreadsheet, you'll get the fully rounded figure, the fully complete figure, because that's how spreadsheets work. So it's best not to rewrite your figures in, just use the figure that's been calculated through your formula, and then it gets followed through. So you make sure you get the own figure rule marks. Hopefully that answers the question. What are the topics that usually come up in section C and section B? Okay, well that was asked before I went through my session, so hopefully you're clear on that. Section C is working capital, investment appraisal, and business finance. And just as a reminder, business finance includes those dreaded questions comparing equity and debt finance. And so you really mustn't ignore those ones and just concentrate on weighted average cost of capital. And section B, you definitely are going to get business valuations and risk management. Is there a possibility that foreign currency will be asked in section C? No. In Tax UK, there are 3 topics that constantly asked in section B. What are these constantly asked? Oh, so we've got that. Section B done. I want to clarify the rounding of decimal places in answers. In performance management, section C specifically mentions how to round to 2 decimals. How does it apply to financial management? Should we follow the specific rounding rule, or does it depend on the question? So when you're doing it in section C, rounding doesn't matter because you just put it in the cell and then use it. When you're doing an MCQ question, I would tend to round to 2 decimal places if you're using a percentage. So if it's, say, I don't know, 10.67%, then at least you know that you're not got too much of a rounding in there. The other issue comes with things like When you're using discount factors, obviously use the discount factors which are to 3 decimal places in section A and section B, or the annuity factors are to 3 decimal places. What will happen is the 4 answers will be there, and it'll be obvious which one's your answer. So try not to do rounding too early, shall we say. In section A and B, they also ask you to put an input into a question, and they tend to tell you to the nearest dollar or to 2 decimal places. So it should, or to the nearest $1,000. So really make sure you practice what you're doing. How should we answer the theory question when a question says to discuss? So when a question says to discuss, it means explain your answer. So if it says discuss whether the net present value is the most superior technique, then you will have to explain whether you think that's a correct statement by using examples. So discuss is not just state, it's using examples and explaining because and why. Doesn't necessarily mean pros and cons, because that could be critically discussed. Hopefully that's clear. What are the Excel formula that is permitted by the ACCA exam software? So the relevant Excel formulas for your exam are you have to type in. So the IRR formula is an important one to know how to do, because that saves you a lot of time if you're asked for the IRR in section C. The net present value formula, you can use the square root formula, the sum formula, and those, or the average formula. Those are all the ones that you can use. If you go onto the practice platform, you'll be able to see in the helps function, there's an Excel sheet there, Excel sheet formula, which tells you all the formulas that you can use or functions. If I could have maybe if I could quickly show you. I would just calling it up before I show you where it all is. Okay, I could quickly share the screen for this one. So just checking that you can share the screen. So in the practice platform, you can see the help and formula sheet at the bottom. You've got question help, formula sheet, exam instructions. In the question help, it tells you the word processing questions, what you can use, and it tells you the spreadsheet functions. So if you go through that, you can see how you can use the spreadsheets. You've got percentage formats, fractions, and then here you go, sum, average, square root, power, count, round, log, NPV, IRR. So they're all there for you. So it's just up to you to go and do a bit of research and practice using them. So hopefully I've come back. During the CBE exam, do we get access to Excel in section C like shown during tick marking? So you will have a spreadsheet in section C to be able to use to answer your 2 section C questions. So if you're quick and efficient, absolutely, you could go and use those to help you in your section A and section B questions. Absolutely. But it does require you to navigate through to section C and back again. So if I were you, I would use the navigate function when I was doing that. So let me share my screen again. So here you can use this navigate. So let's say you're in section A, you can navigate to this section knowing that there is a spreadsheet for you to use, and then you can do your quick workings up here. But then what you need to do is once you've done the workings, let's say you're doing I don't know. and you want to do an IRR. I know this is all in, I'm just making up some numbers here. So you want to do an IRR function because you're in, so you could quickly do IRR because you put in the formula, IRR, open formula, highlight the cash flows, and then that's your IRR, which is 33%. Okay, I'm checking that's a bit high, isn't it? Let's try and make that a bit smaller. So it's 2.67%, which is the IRR. But what you'd have to do is, if you haven't completed section C yet, then you need to get rid of that quickly. So I would click on here, are you sure you want to reset? Because you don't want that in your section C answer. And you click yes, reset. So yes, you can use the spreadsheet to help you. I have a confusion whether to write one line in one cell or should write in the separate cells. Yeah, I absolutely showed you that's what I prefer you to do. Write one line in one cell, so one short sentence. And if the sentence is long, by all means, cut off the sentence and then go down to the next cell. Because it's really important that we don't have long-winded writing all the way across, because it's really hard to see it and it's really hard to mark, which what you saw when you saw the marking exercise I was showing. What strategies to use if we're attempting the second time? So if you're attempting for the second time, you should be able to review your My Exam performance that the ACCA give you straight after your result. You should be therefore able to look in the time management section and see where you failed the exam. If you got a percentage that's lower than 50% in section A, then that means you failed section A. If it was higher than 50%, then you passed section A. And therefore that gives you some indication of whether you're doing well in the MCQ areas, and it's the section C where you failed the exam. You can then have a look at the syllabus areas that were covered in your exam, and you can see where you performed well or didn't perform well again. And therefore that will direct your study. So if you're not performing well in the MCQ areas, it's down to exam technique. You're not focusing on the easy marks. You're trying to get the harder marks at the expense of your time management. You just need to make sure you get at least 7 or 8 out of those 15 questions. And 5 of them will be really hard. Now, please don't waste time getting the harder questions and then failing on the easier questions because you're panicking or getting distracted. So exam technique is really important in the MCQ areas. Even the most seasoned candidate could get those MCQs wrong by misreading the question and rushing through. Section C is really important to practice formats. Practice, practice. There's a format for every type of section C question that you should be able to throw down very quickly in that spreadsheet. And then it's just a case of filling in the numbers. So that is another exam technique thing you should be doing if you're attempting for the second time. The other area where students are failing tends to be in the written sections because they don't give that priority. So practice planning answers to the written section questions. Go and have a look at some of the types of questions that have been asked in the past. Plan the answers rather than writing them out in full. Plan them and then think about what else you would write. Think about trying to use copy and paste to save time by copying from the scenario or by copying your answer above and then rewording the second factor. So sometimes it's nice to be able to write in one sentence, one advantage of the IRR is blah, blah, blah. Then you copy that and you put it into a second sentence, another advantage of the IRR, and then you just change the other end. So its typing can be also time consuming. So get practiced at using headings, and get quick at using copy and paste to shorten your answering time. So another question now, do I need to read full study text or relying just on Study Hub is enough? The answer is, it depends on you as a learner. Okay? I do not learn by reading. I learn by doing. So what I do is I create mind maps and I create for each of the main areas, and I create formats. And I do that by doing questions. And if I don't know an answer to a question, then I will go and find the answer from the Study Hub and then add it to my mind map and add it to my format. Practicing questions now is the most important thing to be doing. If you don't know how to do a question, then absolutely go back to the Study Hub and find the answer. The more questions you do from the CBE platform, the more likely you are to pass, because questions are repeated, but just in a slightly different way. Techniques and theory are still the same. Hopefully that's clear. Oh, keep going. It says, please work me through a market value formula for loan notes. I need to understand how discount factors are calculated. So I can't do that right now, but I do have a topic explainer on that in the ACCA student resources area. So you can go and have a look at my topic explainer on calculating the market value of loan notes. The discount factors aren't calculated, they're found on the discount tables. And you need to pick the discount factor that is pre-tax, because we don't have tax in the market value of loan notes formula. And you need a present value factor and you need an annuity factor, which matches the length of the loan note term. Anyway, go and have a look at the topic explainer. I'm sure we could put a link in the chat so you know where that is. Can I please clarify, I understood correctly, there will be 10 points on foreign exchange chapter. Yes, not foreign exchange chapter. There will be 10 points on risk management, which includes interest rate risk as well as foreign exchange risk. At least 10 points. Kindly guide us accordingly. If I use the Study Hub without the BPP or Kaplan, do I have a guarantee of passing my exam? There's no guarantees, but the Study Hub is a comprehensive resource of what the examine of the syllabus. So using the Study Hub in conjunction with the CBE platform and making sure you do a mock will be a good way of ensuring a pass on the exam. However, it's all down to how effective you are. And looking at answers and then repeating that answer is not as effective as having a go, investigating how to do something, having a go, and then looking at the answer, because you learn from it rather than just saying, oh, yes, I would have written that. Okay. Should we show all the working notes, or can we just put the working in the formula? You just need to put the working in the cells. So if you label the cell market price, and then in the cell you put equals the figure that you found for the EPS and the figure that you found for the PE ratio, times them together, that will get a working mark if one of those figures is an own figure rule figure, shall we say. You don't need to write out EPS times PE ratio, no. I've answered the next one about section C again. How best to prepare for section B questions. So what you do is you look at the section B question. If you can't do it, you go to the Study Hub, you find out what the technique is, what the theory is, and then you come back and have a look at it. Just looking at the answer for the section B questions will not help you, because you haven't understood the theory and the technique behind that answer. In what topics do examinees lose the most marks? I think the hardest topic that students don't like in section C tends to be business finance, looking at equity versus debt. I think that one is one that most students don't score very highly on. So that's important to practice, and there's lots of questions in the practice platform on that topic. Resource to study, study hub, Kaplan or BPP, they're all equally as valid. How much worth of theories can we expect in the exam? So you can expect about 50-50. So in the MCQ areas, they're discursive questions which are on theories, and equally in section C, there tends to be 20 marks on writing. As someone who has failed by 46, 44, what would you expect? I've attempted learning more depth and started question practice. This is my last skills paper. So you failed by 46, 44. That means it's exam technique. So you need to look at yourself long and hard and think, are you sticking to time on the sections? Are you maximizing the easy marks on the sections? Are you spending too much time on the calculations in section C at the detriment of getting some decent written answers out in section C? Are you writing in full sentences and explaining because and why? You need to take a hard look at yourself and be sure that when you look at your My Exam performance, it will be obvious of what is happening. Now, also, you know in your heart of hearts whether you could actually do some of those section C questions. If you felt that you could do them, then it must be your exam technique. I think we've just finishing now, haven't we, Risha?
Thanks, Jo. Before we close Q&A, there is one question coming. If the last one, if this one you can read it. Like, when it comes to cost of discount calculation, which formula is acceptable, both the simple interest and compound? But if it comes in section A, which should we use? If you check your inbox, you will get
When it comes to the
this.
cost of discount calculation, which formula is set to remove both the simple interest and the compound interest? Oh, settlement discount. Yeah, well, that has been that's in a technical article, and it shows you exactly how the ACCA examine that. You need to use the compound in the technical article. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's 1 plus the discount to the number of periods in the year. I think that's what they're asking about, settlement discounts. So go and have a look at the technical article called Interest, and it shows you how to do it clearly.
Okay. Thank you,